Good day, students. So this is your first pre-recorded lecture for Literature 1, Philippine Literature. So our topic for today is about the introduction to literature. Okay, so let's move on. First, for the introduction, the study of literature can be viewed as beneficial to students in many ways. For this particular program, the learners will get the chance to take a peek in the Philippines' history, culture, and traditions through the artistic eyes of different authors of their time. It will also serve as a good English comprehension practice for our learners through the literary pieces featured in this manual. So, in this course or subject, please expect that you will deal with a lot of Philippine literary pieces that will talk about the history, culture, and traditions of the Philippines through the artistic eyes of our Filipino notable writers. So, in this course, it will serve as a good English comprehension practice, or it will practice your understanding on each literary pieces. Okay? So, okay, so let's move to the first question for this topic. The question is, what is literature? So there is no specific definition for literature. It has a lot of meaning. So there is no single definition that can sum up the word literature. But here are some of them that we got from dictionaries, famous writers, internet sources, and notable books. So, first, literature can be defined as pieces of writing that are valued as works of art, especially novels, plays, and poems. That is from Oxford Advanced Learners English Dictionary. So, according to this, literary pieces are pieces of arts. Okay? So, writers are also considered as artists. Next definition, literature adds to reality. It does not simply describe it. It enriches the necessary competencies that daily life requires and provides, and in this respect, it irrigates the deserts that our lives have already become. That is from C.S. Lewis. So according to C.S. Lewis, literature can be a reflection of reality in a creative way. So it is a depiction of life in a creative way. It is not a direct description of life, as literature adds color to our lives. Okay, so next. Literature is where I go to explore the highest and lowest places in human society and in the human spirit, where I hope to find not absolute truth but the truth of the tale, of the imagination, and of the heart. That is from Salman Rushdie. So, according also to Salman Rushdie, your audience will listen to you or read the content but won't do both. So, literature, if you are a reader of literature like novels, stories, even short stories in Wattpad, you are a traveler. You can travel to any other places through the stories that you are reading. You can be any kind of people that you want through reading. You can do, or you can imagine any other things through reading, because by reading, it is like experiencing an extraordinary um, circumstances. Okay? Okay, so let's move on to the forms of literature. So literature has two forms. First is the prose. Second is poetry. For prose, it is a spoken or written language without a metrical regularity. So examples of this are novels, even short stories from Wattpad. So these are prose. It doesn't have metrical regularity, written in free verse. Okay, so next form of literature is poetry. So poetry, it is the imaginative expression of emotion, thoughts, or narrative, frequently on metrical form and often using figurative language. It has traditionally been distinguished from prose by rhyme or by rhythmical arrangement of words. So, a very good example of poetry is your poems. Okay, so even in yung spoken poetry that you are doing right now, it is an example of poetry. So let's move on to the types of prose. Number one, first example of a prose is novel. So, definition of novel, it is an extended fictional prose narrative, often including the psychological development of the central characters and their relationship with the broader world. Novel is classified according to the genres and subgenre, such as the historical novel, detective fiction, fantasy, and science fiction. So examples of novel that is very famous right now is Hunger Games, Harry Potter, etc. So these are novels, okay? Long stories that is evolving or circulating on the life of a specific character. Next is a short story. Short story, it is an artistic form of prose fiction which entered on a single main incident whose aim is to produce a single dominant impression. Its qualities are economy, compression, brevity, and emphasis. On short story, it is fiction. Pag sinabi nating fiction, it is made by the imagination of the writer and not based on true life. Okay, so fiction, it is just from someone's imagination or the writer's imagination. So that is short story. Next is play. So play, it is a piece of creative work presented on stage. It is usually divided into acts. So play, this is a type of prose that you usually see on theaters, like Romeo and Juliet, like Hamlet of William Shakespeare. So these are plays. Okay, so okay, so number 4 is legend. So legend, it is a traditional or undocumented story about famous people, commonly religious in character and frequently posing problems of authenticity. So usually in legends, it is a story about a certain person, and that character is usually or frequently religious in character and always posing problems, and usually it gives solutions to that certain problem. Okay, so number 5, fable. So we all know this, the fable. It is a story in either verse or prose in which animals or inanimate objects are given the mentality and speech of human beings to point out a moral lesson. So in fable, the characters are not human beings. The characters are animals or inanimate objects. Okay, so that is Fable. For number 6, anecdote. Anecdote, it is a product of the writer's imagination whose aim is to bring out lessons to the readers. It can be stories about animals or children. So in anecdote, its main purpose is to give lessons, life lessons to the readers or even to the watchers. Okay? So number 7, essay. Essay, it is a short piece of non-fiction dealing with particular subject from personal point of view. So in essay, it is usually from a personal point of view of a writer. It depends on the presumptions or understanding of the writer. So that is essay. Number 8 is biography. So biography, it is an account of a person's life. It may consist of factual details of a person's life told in chronological order, but has generally become a matter of interpretation as well as historical accuracy. So, biography, the famous biography that we all read when we are in high school or we were in high school is the life of Rizal. So, even in college, you are taking this course, the PI 100, which is the life and works of Rizal. So, that course is also um, deals with the biography of our national hero Jose Rizal. So, biography is written by other people inspired by the life of another people. And then, if you are writing your own biography, we call that autobiography. Okay? Okay, number 9 is news. So in news, it is a report of daily events in society, government, or in science and industry. So example of news are editorial news, which is news depending on the opinion of the writer, and then development news, which is about development of societies, and then showbiz news, the news about celebrities in a specific country or internationally, and then many more. Okay, so we have many types of news, and some of it are you are aware. Okay, so let's move on to the 10th. Okay, so 10th example of a prose is oration. So oration, it is a piece of work relative to speech whose aim is to arouse the listener's interest and emotion. So oration is somehow related to public speaking. It is most of the time, it is presented on an audience, and an audience will have to listen to it just for them to be aroused on a specific on their interest. Okay, so again, oration is not usually written, it is usually presented on a public, okay, through a speech. Okay, so let's move on to the elements of a short story. So So we have 6 elements of a short story. First is the setting. So setting, it is an element that reveals where the story happened. It is the location where the story takes place. Okay, it is a specific place. Next is the characters. Characters, they are the performers of a story. It may refer to the hero or to the heroine of the story. It includes people playing an important role in a given story aside from the principal characters. And the next is the plot. Plot, it refers to the storyline in a novel. play, film, or other work of fiction. It is traditionally a scheme of connected characters. Okay, so in plot, this is the outline of the happenings in a story. Okay, number 4 is theme. So theme, it refers to the central idea of any piece of literary work. For example, if your story is about romance or love story, it is a romance in theme. For example, a story is about life, so that is inspirational, or comedy or horror, so those are themes. Okay, so number 5 is the point of view. Point of view, it is a device used by the writer in presenting his ideas. Usually, the point of view is always and can be seen through dialogues. Okay, through the dialogues, you can see how the character thinks or reacts on a specific happening or specific thing. Okay, so number 6 is the conflict. It refers to the collision between one character and another, between a character and some elements in the world about him. So usually the conflict is the problem of the story, and how you can also see on the story and how the character resolves it. Okay, now so let's move on to the second form of literature, which is the poetry. And poetry has 3 types. First is the narrative poetry. Second is the lyric poetry. And then third is the dramatic poetry. First, narrative poetry, it describes important details in life following the order of events, either real or imaginary. They are classified as epic, metrical tales, and ballad. In narrative poetry, it is just like telling a story but with rhythm and measure. Okay, so number 2, lyric poetry. It is any short poems which is song-like. This is the most common type of poetry. Okay, so in lyric poetry, it is performed through a song. Okay, so it is song-like. And then number 3, dramatic poetry. It tells stories like narrative poetry but in dialogues of play rhymes, repeating rhymes, and other poetic elements. Okay, so in dramatic poetry, it is a drama, but the dialogues are not in free verse, but in measures, like a narrative poetry. Okay, so we have classifications of a narrative poetry. So we have 2 classifications of a narrative poetry. Number 1 is epic, and number 2 is metrical tale. If we say epic, it is a narrative poem or cycle of poem dealing with some great deeds like the founding of a nation or the forging of national unity. They often use religious or cosmological themes. So if we say epic, it is about a founding of a nation or forging of national unity. And it is told with measurements in verses, and it rhymes. Okay, and the number 2 classification of narrative poetry is the metrical tale. For metrical tale, it is a type of narrative written in verse. It is classified as either ballad or metrical romance. So, metrical romance, the first classification of metrical tale. So, it is a type of metrical tale composed of a long, rambling love story in verse. Okay, so it is centered on the adventure of knights and lords and their royal ladies during the age of chivalry. It is heavily flavored with romance, fantastic events, supernatural occurrences, and magic. And another classification of metrical tale is ballad. Ballad is a natural type of poem that is metrically simple, sometimes unstrophic and unrhymed, or dependent in assonance. Okay. So let's move on to the examples of a lyric poetry. Again, lyric poetry is a classification or a type of poetry. Okay, so for examples of a lyric poetry is number one, haiku. Haiku is a short Japanese poem consisting of 17 syllables arranged in 3 lines. So, haiku specifically consists of 17 syllables arranged in 3 lines. Number two example is the ode. Ode is a serious lyric poetry that commemorates important public events. It consists of stanzas with the same pattern of rhythm and rhyme. So, for the keyword for ode is important public events. It always commemorates an important public event. Number three is elegy. Elegy is a common lyric that deals with life and death. It mourns the death of a loved one. So elegy is a lyric poetry about family or a loved one. And then 4 is a sonnet. Sonnet is a love poem that mostly consists of 14 lines and has a certain pattern of rhyme and rhythm. So usually and most of the time, sonnet consists of 14 lines and it always talks about love or romance. Okay, so now let's move on to the figures of speech. Okay, first type of figure of speech is the simile. Simile consists of comparing two things using the words like or as. Example, she is like a fairy. So we compare two things, a female human being and a fairy. So we use the word like to compare the female human being to a fairy. So that is simile. Number 2 is metaphor. Metaphor, it uses a direct comparison of two unlike things or ideas. Example, she is the star of the show. So yung two direct comparison of two unlike things, we can see another female human being and the star, which is an inanimate object. Okay, so we use the star to define the female human being. Okay, so she is the star of the show, and that is a direct comparison. Unlike in simile, we use the word like or as. Here, we doesn't use any words like that. Okay, in metaphor. And number 3, personification. It gives human traits to inanimate objects or ideas. So, for example, the furious storm disrupted the city. Okay, so the inanimate object is the storm and furious is a human trait. Okay, so we've used the word furious to describe the inanimate object, which is the storm. Okay, so that is personification. And then number 4, it is a direct address to someone absent, dead, or inanimate. For pag sinabi nating inanimate, it is things or objects that doesn't really have life. Okay? So, for example, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So, this phrase or statement is just like you are talking to a person, but you are talking to an inanimate object, which is the star. So, that is the use of apostrophe. You are addressing or talking to someone absent, dead, or inanimate. Next, number 5. Number 5 is metonymy. Metonymy, it substitutes a word that closely relates to a person or a thing. So, example is the pen is mightier than the sword. So, we've used the pen to substitute an activity or what they call this, an action of a person. So the good example for metonymy is the pen is mightier than the sword. So you substitute a word that closely relates to a person or a thing. So it just means that if someone writes, that action is mightier or a lot stronger than hurting someone. Okay, so number 6 is synecdoche. Synecdoche is, it uses a part to represent the whole. Example, all hands at work. So, it uses a part of a body, for example, the hands, to represent the whole. So, it just means that the person is focused at work. Okay? So, number 7 is hyperbole. Hyperbole, it makes use of exaggeration. Okay? So, exaggeration or overstatement. Example is, her hair was a flowing golden river. So, if we can simplify this sentence, we can just say, her hair was beautiful. Okay? So, but if we can create a hyperbole statement, we can use this. Her hair was a flowing golden river. Okay? So number 8, irony. Irony, it says the opposite of what is meant, or we call that sarcasm. Okay? Sarcasm. So example, nice clean water that you've got here, says the speaker as he is standing on the edge of a polluted water. So I know you know that sarcasm. Irony is usually depicted as sarcasm. Number 9, allusion. So for number 9, it refers to any literary, biblical, historical, mythological, scientific event, character, or place. So example, she was a good Samaritan when she helped the lady. So the word good Samaritan, we can always see that on a Bible. So that is an allusion, and that allusion was it came from a Bible. Another, for example, is she is the Einstein of her class. It means that she is the most intelligent in her class. So we know that Einstein is a notable personality in the science field. Okay, so that is allusion. You are using a term from any from famous sources. Okay, and then number 10 is antithesis. Antithesis involves a contrast of words or ideas. Example, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Okay, so number 11, paradox. A paradox, it uses phrases or statement that on surface seems contradictory but makes some kind of emotional sense. So in paradox, it may be contradictory, but if you understand it deeply, it makes sense. Example, I must be cruel to be kind. That is written by William Shakespeare in Hamlet. Okay, so next is 12, the oxymoron. Oxymoron puts together in one statement two contradictory terms. So example, big baby, known secret, original copy, the living dead. So oxymoron is similar to paradox, but paradox is a statement while oxymoron is just two words combined in a statement. Okay, it just consists of two words. Lastly is the onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the formation of or use of words which imitate sounds, but the term is generally expanded to refer to any word whose sound is suggestive of its meaning, whether by imitation or through cultural inference. So example is the tweet of the bird. So we are just saying the sound of the bird, okay? So the buzz of the bees. So another example is the buzz of the bees. We're just saying that we can hear the sound of the bees, okay? So Okay, so that's it for today. So if you have questions, you can just send me a message at my Facebook account. So thank you everybody, and I hope you have learned something from this lecture. And if you have questions, don't forget and don't hesitate to ask me. Okay, so that's all for today. Have a good day, everyone.